Here's a question we all need to ask ourselves. In a country as divided as ours, can we actually agree on what our kids need? My guest today walked out of a public school classroom, not out of frustration alone, but because she saw something that most people miss. Stay with me. Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate the Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. Today's conversation is one that I've been looking forward to since I first met our guest months ago. Lauren Farrow's journey begins inside the public school system as a classroom teacher, not just observing it from the outside, but living it from the inside. And what she saw wasn't a broken system. That's an important distinction. What she saw was a system that's working exactly the way that it was designed. And that design has some serious problems at its root. So Lauren did something about it. She left the classroom, founded schoolingamerica.org, and became a homeschooling consultant and education reform advocate who doesn't play politics with any of this. She's not on a side. She's on the side of all the kids. And through Schooling America, she's building bridges between parents, educators, and community members on both sides of the aisle around a single belief that children in this country deserve a bright future, full stop. Today we're going deep on the real problems behind the headlines: bureaucracy, funding, teacher autonomy, school choice, and what courageous citizenship actually looks like when it comes to fixing what ails our education system. This is a big one, folks. Let's get into it with my friend, Lauren Farrow. Here we go. Lauren Farrow, welcome to the Derate the Hate podcast. It is great to see you again today.
Good to see you, Wilk.
Yes, I've been looking forward to our conversation since our last conversation. And the topic today is one that hits right at home for so many parents and should, quite honestly, hit at home for every American citizen, in my opinion, because the children, not to be cliche, but the children are our future, right? They are absolutely our future. Today's children, today's students are tomorrow's leaders. And we all have skin in the game, whether we have kids or not. So, Lauren Farrow, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today. And I want to get started just with a little bit of your backstory, Lauren, and how you got into being an educator, and then how you started being this kind of homeschool consultant. And tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so I was a public school teacher for a number of years. I've been studying education for around 6 years at this point. And when I was teaching in public schools, I noticed that wow, our nation is so divided and our children are at the brunt of all of it. I taught within, a suburban community, so more of a connected, I would say parents were more involved at the school I was at, but it still felt void of true involvement, of initiative. And I witnessed so many children struggling with behavior issues, with academic issues. Of course, I was teaching post-pandemic. So we saw lacking like test scores and social skills. But I realized that it's beyond my experience, that millions of other teachers are also experiencing what I had experienced, which was just chaos within the public schools, within the classrooms. And I learned that the education system isn't broken. It's functioning exactly how it was designed, right? And it's failing because the design is it's damaged at the root. And so I found that in order to support students the way that they truly need to be supported and to give teachers the voice that they need, to be heard and to make the change that they need to make, I could not do that within the classroom, within the school system. So I did leave teaching, and now I do, education consulting, homeschool consulting with Schooling America. And so I support families who want to take an alternative education route. I support, parents who want to get more involved, who want to get more connected to their children. And I, create these conversations around kind of what's working in the education system, what's not, how can we make it better? How can we support teachers in the way that they truly need to be supported? And creating the platform to bring this conversation together. Schooling America is not political. I welcome everyone from either side of the spectrum because we share the common belief that children deserve a bright future with equal opportunity without being pulled in any direction, right? So we're talking about how, can we as a divided nation agree on what children need? And I think the only thing we can disagree on many, many things, and we see it.
Yeah.
But the one thing I think we can all come together on, what we can truly agree, is that children deserve a bright future with freedom to speech, freedom to build what they want to build, create what they want to create, and, become independent, productive, capable adults.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that, Lauren. I mean, we as a nation, no matter how divided we are, you would think, or I would at least hope, that we could come together on, far too often people are completely focused on all those things that divide us. And what you're saying, Lauren, I think is so important because we should at least be able to come together for a point of agreement in saying that we want the children of America to have we want the children of the world, in my opinion, but specifically America. Let's, kind of start where we are, to have a bright future, to be able to live up to their potential. So I definitely want to get into the fix and how we can make things better. But before we do, Lauren, I want to talk a little bit about what you said there and how the system is doing what it's designed to do, and it's rotten at the root. Because I think that's a little bit controversial, but I definitely have a lot of agreement with you in that statement, and I want to hear what you mean by that and kind of expand upon it, and then we'll kind of work into what you see as the remedy for what ails this system.
Right. So there are so many places where I can start, but I can think of a couple ways when, decades ago, when we introduced standardized testing and Common Core curriculums, and when politics really became a war over ideologies and a war where, like a proxy war, where politicians would send out their, lobbyists. They would lobby certain ideas and certain, get people in fear for what they're trying to push on a larger scale. And that trickles down into the classrooms and into the school system. So when we're thinking about, bringing it way back, how, Rockefeller, he was a pioneer for the education system. So he expanded education, expanded libraries, expanded so many opportunities for schools. But at the same time, the classroom was transformed in a way where it benefited him. Although he wasn't a politician directly, he was a widely influential figure in shaping today's classrooms. And so what we see now is still a replica of what he created, which is bell-to-bell schedules. It mimics the industrial warehouse, right? We're producing compliant workers, compliant students who listen and follow directions, which of course is necessary. When you're in a classroom, you're trying to learn. Of course, we want, students listening. We want them to, be on course. But what we're finding is on a larger scale, this is harmful. And so when we're looking at, that's just one example. When we're looking at the modern classroom and we're looking at the teachers are stripped of their autonomy. They're stripped of their freedom. We think of teachers as the leaders of the classroom, but really it's the admin of the school, which is also controlled by the superintendent, right? The district office, who is then controlled by the state Department of Education. And this bureaucracy is necessary. However, when we're thinking about what the child in the classroom actually needs, the teacher is the most important and the most informed for that, right? They spend 180 days out of the entire year with these children, with, 8 hours a day. Sometimes children are at school for 10 hours a day, counting before school programs and after school programs. Getting parents involved and getting teachers and parents on the same team is essential. It's part of what I advocate.
Absolutely.
And although I provide homeschool consulting and I promote homeschool as an alternative education option, I don't think we should abandon public schools and public school teachers. We still need to give them the love and attention that they need. Although school choice is a huge topic of conversation right now, we truly do need to, we can't just leave public education to figure it out on its own. I mean, like, what are we going to do about the Title I schools?
Sure.
And when it's such a systemic issue, we have to consider what funding on a level, like when I say the system is rotten at the root, it's in so many different ways we can pick apart where and what places it's corrupted. And we can look at Title I schools. Funding is based for Title I schools around the neighborhoods and the zip codes. And so Title I schools need so much more funding than they actually get. And they're like Title I schools, just to clarify for the audience who may not know, is over half of the student population, their families are below the poverty line. Okay. So they're struggling financially with their home life. There's a lot of, struggles that these children come to schools with. And so school is a safe place for them, right? But if we're not giving teachers resources, we're not giving the students what they need when we need more interventionists or behavior counselors for that school, and positions are being cut and resources are being cut, it can be a scary thing. But there are so many ways that I could mention and go into how it's kind of a spider web of a mess. Sure.
Well, and I'm going to say a few things here, and then I want to get into a little bit more deeply into the bureaucracy of the whole thing. Like, I heard you say that the bureaucracy is necessary to a certain extent. So I want to get into that. And I, the DTH listeners, Lauren, know that I talk a lot about root cause problem solving, and I was in business operations for a long time, and root cause problem solving is a big part of operations, and we don't see a lot of root cause problem solving in anything having to do with government, in my opinion. That's my opinion, and maybe you share it. But what I do want to talk about, when we talk about rotten at the root, or you to use your words, rotten at the root, and then the bureaucracy that's involved with it, I absolutely agree that teachers and parents need to be on the same page, and there's a lot there that we could unpack. But when we start to think about the teachers being hamstrung because of whether it be the school board or the superintendent or the State Department of Education and things like that. We have so many levels of bureaucracy involved with our children's education now. So when we start to think about the lack of resources and the lack of funding, the reality that maybe you can help me with, because I'm of the opinion that not nearly enough money that we spend on education ends up at the classroom level, and the vast majority of it ends up within the bureaucracy levels up above the classroom. And I think that's a big problem. That's the root cause of a lot of our problems. And I don't think many people fully understand that, because I mean, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, because, we hear about the teachers and the teachers unions, and they're striking, and they're saying the teachers don't get enough money. The taxpayers need to contribute more money. And the reality is if the money that the taxpayers were contributing was actually going to the classrooms, there would be plenty of it. I don't know, this isn't something that I've studied deeply, but I will tell you that, like, I did not want my daughter in a public school classroom for one of those very reasons. And, thankfully we've got her in a charter school, and we were able to do that and feel very fortunate for that. But I agree that the public school system cannot just be completely discarded, but there's got to be some work that we could do with the levels of bureaucracy so that the funding that they are getting, whether they be Title I schools or any other school, that the money that's being contributed to the system is actually going to the classroom and the teachers are working in direct contact with the parents. Dive into that a little bit for me.
Yeah, that is a huge reason why that teachers are starting to resent their local unions and state and federal unions, the National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers, because they're waking up and realizing my union dues, the taxes that are taken out of my paychecks, all the money that we assume is going towards the public schools and supporting our classrooms, a lot of it, a huge majority of it is being funded. It's funding politics, is lobbying politics, is funding, politician-backed unions and politician-backed organizations. And it's very frustrating to know that teachers are making, in my state, when I started out, I was making $45,000, and that's before taxes were taken out. So a lot of our income as teachers goes to buying school supplies for students. Sometimes, buying them shoes, buying them a backpack, buying them notebooks and pencils, depending on what they need in order to show up to school and to not be hungry, to be able to learn and not just, eat Cheetos and Takis. We want to give them snacks that will help them learn. That's a lot of money that we invest that isn't necessarily on the surface level that you would think that teachers, contribute to their classrooms and their students. And so when we think about all the resources and the money that's supposed to be going to these teachers and supposed to be going to these schools, it's really disheartening. And that's part of what's demoralizing teachers. We have no power to speak out about these types of things. We see admin inflation, which is when, the teacher to admin pipeline, whether you become, let's say, the school secretary, a principal, assistant principal, one of the leadership positions inside of a school, there's been a huge inflation of admin, and then they get paid double, significantly more than teachers get paid, and they're not necessarily in the classrooms. They're running the school, which of course has its own responsibilities, rightfully so, but we think about how there's breadcrumbs left for teachers, and they can't even speak out about it, or else they're labeled, or they're asking for too much, or they get it's really sad. When you're in the system, it's some sort of it's a mistreatment from admin to the teachers. Because if you do make too much noise, if you do create too much fuss, they have to deal with it. And they're already burnt out too. They're burnt out just as much as teachers are because they're running around supporting, like putting out fires and doing crisis interventions and all sorts of things. And so when we look at school choice now, so school choice and the school voucher program is incredible because in some states, like in Florida, if you are a parent and you choose to homeschool your child, you will get the money that would technically follow the student to the school. The school loses that funding and actually it goes right back into the parent's pocket. So in Florida, I believe it's around $8,000. You get $8,000 as a parent, and you get to choose what you want to do with that homeschool budget. Buy curriculum, sign them up for extracurriculars, piano or sports. You get to decide with that money, with that funding, you get the power back into your hands. And when you look at classrooms, let's think about it. I'm not sure of the exact number, but let's say it's $8,000 per student per classroom. That's delegated from the state Department of Education to the schools. And let's say there's 20 students in one class, $8,000 per student. We can do the math. That's a lot of money, a huge amount of money. And you can think about, okay, keeping the lights on in the school, that costs money, air conditioning, which goes out in a lot of classrooms. Yeah.
Definitely an important thing in Florida to have air conditioning in the classroom.
I know, especially in those late spring months, man, it gets hot, So yeah, textbook contracts, that's a lot of money. And unfortunately, a lot of these major textbook companies are also under scrutiny and have, lawsuits over racking up their prices. There was a lawsuit in Florida recently over a major textbook publishing company because they changed their prices for different schools or districts that they were selling to, which is unethical. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at the education system, it's so vulnerable. And our students are just being like, they're facing the consequences of greedy people, of people who want to use money for their own agenda, their own objectives. And I'm not saying everyone is evil. I want to give benefit of the doubt. I want to say that I'm not just assuming malintent on, all ends, but there have been, I think the trust is broken and teachers need the resources, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the trust is broken, and we are at a time, Lauren, when our country is seeing the degradation of trust across all institutions, not just education. Education's obviously a big one, but I want to talk about how we then bridge these divides because the reality is again, going back to that cliche thing that the children are our future. We should be able to agree on, no matter where you fall along the political spectrum or no matter whether you have children or not, we should all be able to agree that every child should have the opportunity for a bright future, have the opportunity to live up to their potential, have the opportunity for a good education. There are so many points of commonality we should have, but a lot of times we don't, and we end up fighting over the semantics of it, and instead of actually looking at where we can find common ground and what we can accomplish. So I want to talk, with the last, portion of our conversation here, I want to start talking about how we can bridge the divides. How, what are ways that parents can become more involved with the teachers? What are ways that the teachers can become more connected with the parents? And what are some of your solutions for the bureaucracy? What are your thoughts on how we can get more funding to the Title I schools that need the additional funding when they really aren't getting the resources that they need? So let's talk as we round out our time, over the next 8-9 minutes or so. What are some of the solutions to bridge these divides?
There are so many things that I could say. So I'll start off by asking everyone to look at our ancestors and how we evolved over time. The root of humanity, who we are, even today, in a very disconnected, divided world. the root of our existence, the way that we got so far, was because we cooperated, because we came together, because we, decided to have trust in a stranger, right? You want to cooperate, work together, have, assume trust, assume goodwill. And we built over time, we came together, we exchanged value in a way where we genuinely want to help each other. I'll make you a blanket, you make me food, or, we trade this, trade that. There's always been an exchange of value that stems from just genuine connection. And so I think we need to go back to who we are in a way where, even though we're so kind of individualized with all of our smartphones and social media and AI algorithms and customizations and all of that, as much as that kind of brings us all further apart, we need to now more than ever connect with people, like talk to people, have conversations beyond your phone, engage in these hard conversations. Like children are growing up mimicking their parents, right? They see how their families, how their teachers treat other people. They're mimic machines. They mimic, they see, like monkey see, monkey do. And so I ask parents, I ask families, stand up for what's right. Have these important conversations, model this good behavior, when you're out of the grocery store, smiling at people, having children go back to, assuming the world is a good place, that the world is, people aren't scary, harmful, aggressive people, that we can change the way we interact with each other on like a larger scale. I think it's difficult for children now because politics have become so enmeshed in identity, and we see it like this is how a lot of people view it. Your politics determine your identity, which means you are at the hand of politicians, their agendas, they determine your identity, they determine who you are, and that's on both sides of the spectrum, right?
It really is.
Yeah, like if you're too committed to this idea and you worship, this president or this politician, that leaves you susceptible to so many to groupthink and to these echo chambers and to this just like toxic mentality where you have no control, you have no power, you're not taking control of your identity. Right. And that's very scary. And so what we need to do is put identity first. Our identity should then determine our politics, to then determine who we are and how we want to hold ourselves. And, Jonathan Haidt talks about our moral foundations theory, and how a lot of our politics are determined by who we are and our characteristics, whether that's how much you value care, loyalty, authority, sanctity, and like sense of fairness. A lot of the time we don't realize that, of course, those things are developed at home when you're being raised by your family, your parents. A lot of your politics are determined by your culture, your childhood. But when we think about our identities, we should think about how we show up instead of looking at the conversation as it's the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party. We need to be thinking of, values first, our identities, like more conservative versus liberal, so that we're not so attached to these ideas that box you in, that make you feel like you have to act a certain way, you can't say a certain thing, you can't treat someone, it's hive mind, it's groupthink, it's toxic, and it cages people in. And I think that we naturally looked for politics to determine our identity because we're looking to belong. A lot of us are isolated. In my generation and younger, we're seeking some sort of community. And that extends beyond, of course, my generation. A lot of people just are seeking connection in an age where we're so, isolated, and it makes sense. But I think having these conversations and humanizing the individual behind the screen, bringing the humanity, is more important now than ever. And
I agree.
And
when we want to tie this thing, being involved, as you said, showing up to this, the concept of taking an active role in your child's education, and how this. Now, I'm one that believes that the teacher's politics should be kept out of the classroom. The teachers should be back to the reading, writing, arithmetic,
Absolutely.
kind of thing. But we know just in human interaction, these things are going to creep in a little bit. I think the answer to that, and you can tell me how you feel about this, but I think the answer to that is really to have that, again, back to what you said earlier, that parent and teacher connection. I would appreciate it more. Like I said, that the teachers keep their politics out of the classroom. The parents can kind of guide their children in the ways that just out of peer example and how they treat people. That kind of moral clarity that comes along with, or should come along with parenting, should come in most ways from the family, from the parents.
Absolutely.
But,
and it ties into what Braver Angels is promoting with courageous citizenship. It's having the courage and being involved and showing up to the board meetings, putting your voice out there. I think reform, the only true reform we'll see in the education system is from the outside in. Like I said, it's very damaged on the inside. There's been movers and shakers. There's been people who've tried. There's so many teacher influencers on TikTok speaking out, but nothing's going to happen until the outside rallies up, we join together, and we figure out a way to peacefully mend what's been broken. And courageous citizenship is truly the solution, because you have to have courage. And one important thing to mention here is that you have to have, the irony is you have to have a little bit of humility within your courageous, your courage.
Humility is important. Yes.
Yeah. You can't, if you have to be able to acknowledge limitations, admit your mistakes, finding balance and courage, because courage without humility, that becomes arrogance. You become pedestalized. You look down on people and you see it becomes like a martyrdom. And we don't want to do that. We want to have genuine courage, be vulnerable, talk about solutions. If a solution doesn't work, move forward with another one. And it's ironic that the change has to happen from the outside in, but on a personal level, the change has to happen inside first.
Yes.
Right? We have to make that decision inside of our hearts. Look at what we can do on a personal level, and then work outward. And it's like a drop in the ocean. Every single drop of water makes up the entire body of ocean, and every single drop matters. And so we have to have some hope, create some, courageous citizens and find ways where we can move forward and really be, productive.
Yeah. One thing I love about being in the courageous citizenship business here with Braver Angels is like you said, it starts with us. It starts internally as we reclaim our own agency. I mean, a lot of what we see in the education debate, Lauren, as many people can attest to, is just there's so much outrage, whether it be the education thing or many other things that are affected by politics, and far too many things these days are affected by politics. But courageous citizenship is really our ability to reclaim our agency, act instead of react, and then act locally. Like you said, get involved with your school board, get involved, and maybe it's just getting involved in building that relationship with the teacher. But as we reclaim our personal agency and understand that we can affect change, like you said, it's so important. It's not going to come from the inside the education system. The reform is going to come from outside. So we act locally, and then watch as that thing starts to build out. In using the ocean analogy, as we throw that one drop or one pebble in a pond, that one ripple will grow and grow and grow. So no, this is fantastic, and people just need to understand that it's really about being involved. That's what courageous citizenship is. It's about being involved, acting instead of reacting. Once we become outraged and then we react, instead of acting proactively, things start to go sideways. So this education system can be fixed. Those divides that we feel can be bridged, because the reality is we have a lot of points of commonality. I mean, like I said, everybody wants to see a bright future for our children. If we have nothing else but that as a starting point, that can be the cornerstone. We want our children to have a bright future. There's no reason we cannot start to work together. Lauren, this has been a great conversation. You're doing great work with Schooling America, and I'm glad to know that you're now involved with us at Braver Angels down there in the state of Florida, and I look forward to many continued conversations in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Wilk. This was a really great conversation. If anyone watching wants more resources, I recommend you visit my website, schoolingamerica.org, sign up for my newsletter, check out our resources. I would love to connect with you further. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to email me on my contact form on my website. I would love to connect. Appreciate your Wilk.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That information will be in the show notes, and we will talk again.
Bye-bye.
Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together, so please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there. Be kind to one another. Be grateful for everything you've got. And remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.